Welcome, everyone. The board just met in executive session to consider matters regarding proposed, pending, or current litigation, matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or persons, and collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, the Taylor Law. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome. We are always happy to see so many students in the audience, but tonight it's extra meaningful for all of us, as it was a tough week for all of us up here. Unfortunately, as you might know, many community members received an email this weekend that contained false information about the independent budget review this board unanimously approved. The spread of this type of misinformation, whether intentionally distributed or inadvertently shared, taints the very good work our schools do and aims to divide our beautiful and usually united community. But it is also an enormous drain on our district's resources. We all received Dr. Z's email, which contained the accurate information regarding our budget review. Countering misinformation is a time-consuming effort for our central administrators. It takes time away from enhancing our educational programs. It's time taken away from building relationships with our stakeholders. It is time taken away from generating revenues and finding efficiencies. But most importantly, it is time taken away from our community's children. If the last several years are any indication, this weekend's kickoff misinformation campaign will likely not be the only of its kind during budget season. I'm not exactly sure what the solution is. I do know that as a community, each one of us needs to be vigilant for false claims intended to mislead by bad faith players. Tactics such as cherry-picking data, using quotes out of context, and posting manipulative visuals make deceptive emails and social media posts might seem compelling at first glance, but misinformation has the potential to destroy these schools, our housing values, and our community's faith in each other. We all play a part in stopping misinformation. Ask yourself, who is the source of this information? Is it anonymous? What is the tone? Is it hostile and aggressive? Ask yourself, did I even sign up to receive this information? And maybe most importantly, ask yourself, do these accusations fit with what I personally know to be true about our schools, its people, and our fellow neighbors? While we all need to work together to combat misinformation, I do need to tell you that this board values civil discourse and the exchange of constructive ideas. We very much want you to take a critical look at what we do. We read your emails. We invite you to public comments. We want you to attend one or many of the community budget meetings we are hosting this season. Please be an active participant in this budget process. The truth is, we are all in this together, and there is power in us. And as a community, we need to come together and figure out what we value and what we hold true. Thank you for coming today, and I really appreciate you listening to my words. I'm very nervous even just saying it because it's very emotional for me. So thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this meeting and we can turn to some exciting things like honoring your children. So, but first, we will hear from another great student, President Ava DeFeo of the SGO.
So for our past few meetings, we've been working on preparing for our elections for next year because we decided to move them from September to the end of the year. That way, the people that do end up getting elected have more time to kind of just take full advantage of the whole month of September. When we go back to school, it moves pretty quickly. So we've just been spending time like reviewing our SGO constitutions, like looking at what's entailed for each position, that kind of thing. We scheduled another acoustic cafe, which we had a successful one last December, scheduled for May 29th in the courtyard. And it's going to be like a barbecue with music. So everyone's invited. Welcome to come. A lot of clubs come to SGO for financial assistance, like when new clubs are starting or wanting to take care of events and that kind of thing. And it gets a little flustering when there's many people coming up to you, oh, how do I reach out for this kind of help from the SGO? So we created a Google form. Multiple people created a Google form that people can fill out for their clubs and the financial assistance that they may need, the events that they want to take care of, that kind of thing. That way we have it all in one place, organized, and we can address it like that. And then lastly, working cohesively with Ms. Cashman, the school planned a plastic-free lunch on April 14th. 19th, sorry, April 19th. And basically the SGO is working on banners, posters, announcements throughout the school, probably meeting with, in the near future, the environmental club, doing research into the plastic use in our school, that kind of thing. Kind of working on shocking people with the facts, because I feel like it goes over a lot of students and faculty's head about what's going on. So just working on getting buzz for that.
You have some special news. Do you want to announce it?
Yeah, I committed to Fairfield University to study nursing. Thank you.
You're close enough that you can come back every other Thursday and give a report. All right, thank you very much. Dr. Z, your superintendent report.
It's great to see everybody tonight, and congratulations. Fairfield's an awesome place. You're going to love it. I've known a lot of people have gone there and have had a great experience, so congrats. And I'm sure our mom and dad are happy. It's a little close. Good evening, everybody. A couple of announcements. We have some great events coming up. On Tuesday, March 26th, we have our second annual Life Skills basketball game, North Shore versus the Falcons of Locust Valley. We're really excited for that. It's at 9 a.m. in our high school, and everyone's invited. Next Friday, so a week from tomorrow, March 22nd, we have our spring musical from our maskers at the high school. The prom. Senior citizen tickets are free for the Saturday matinee at 2 p.m. And we'll also have shows on Friday evening at 7:30 and Saturday at 7:30 in our high school theater. Congratulations to our men's and women's basketball teams. Our men's team was a finalist for the county championship, and our women's team was a semifinalist. Both final games for each team were extremely close within points, single-digit points, and both teams just had amazing seasons. Congratulations to all of our student athletes and our coaches. Wanted to just bring up, and I'll be communicating more about our special education review. The district issued an RFP for vendors. We interviewed several vendors, and we just weren't satisfied with what we felt would be the final product for that review. We felt it would be very general, be at a high cost, and wouldn't give us the information that we would need. So we are going to be doing an internal review first and look for a more specific external review next year. Last week, the Glenwood Landing School had a visit from the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center and a Holocaust survivor, Gina Zarinsky, who escaped Central Europe during the Holocaust after several terrifying years. We thank Ms. Zarinsky for sharing the important story of survival, kindness, and tolerance. Our UPK lottery will be taking place this Monday at 3 p.m. and you don't need to attend. It's virtual if you're one of our parents who've registered. And nothing gets impacted by being there or not being there or watching or not watching. It will be recorded as well, and I'll be sending out the link tomorrow. We have 2 remaining What Makes Us Us, What Keeps Us Us meetings, which have been great. Monday, March 25th we have a virtual meeting with our elementary parents. And then Wednesday, March 27th, we have an in-person meeting in the high school cafeteria with all open to all community members, parents or not parents. One of these meetings last week, we had some time to meet with local business owners. I want to thank Courtney Sitko and Terrence Kenneth of the Gold Coast Business Association for organizing this meeting with us. We learned so much. It was a great discussion. We've never taken the time to really look at how the tax structure, our budget, and our students impact the local businesses. And we had some great conversations about partnering, about internships, and about how we can support our businesses. We're not allowed as a district to advertise for a business technically, but I'm just going to say shop and eat local. They deserve our support, and they're amazing people, and they've invested in this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so it's now time for student recognition. I know lots of you, this is the reason you are here. I am going to give the same message I give every single time we have students here, which is feel free to take as many pictures as you want. You're allowed to get up from your seat, move around, get the perfect picture. It makes us very excited for that, so don't be shy.
Okay, so these are our best meetings. Thank you again for being here. I'm going to ask Dr. McCary and Dr. Smythes to come up with me to present these awards. So the first recognition we are going to present is for the 41st Annual National Missing Children's Day Poster Contest. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan proclaimed May 25th as National Missing Children's Day. Each year, the U.S. Department of Justice commemorates Missing Children's Day to honor the heroic and exemplary efforts of agencies, organizations, and individuals to protect children. Missing Children's Day is dedicated to encouraging parents, guardians, caregivers, and others concerned with the well-being of children to make child safety a priority. It serves as a reminder to continue our efforts to reunite missing children with their families and an occasion to honor those dedicated to this noble cause. As part of this initiative, the U.S. Department of Justice launched a National Missing Children's Day poster contest, which invites fifth grade students to create a poster to include the theme, Bringing Our Missing Children Home. Glenhead fifth grader Chloe Lim has won third place for the New York State Division. Chloe received a $50 award, and her family will travel to Albany in May for the awards ceremony. Chloe, please come on up. Okay, the next recognition we have is for the Family and Children's Association Fall Harvest honorees. And I want to welcome Ms. Audra Marcantonio, one of our most amazing educators at North Shore and most amazing humans that I've ever had the good fortune of knowing. Thank you for being here, Ms. Marcantonio. Under the inspiring tutelage of enrichment teacher Audra Marcantonio last year, we had two students, Rhea and Joanna, spend months engaged in self-selected service learning projects on homelessness. They created a fictional picture book and informative slideshow on the topic of and oversaw a book bag drive for children living in shelters. Over 50 book bags were gathered, overflowing with school supplies, picture and chapter books, hygiene products, and winter jackets with the help of our generous community. Rhea and Joanna spoke eloquently at the Fall Gala and partook in a book signing. We are so proud of Rhea and Joanna, not only for their creativity in leveraging the narrative form, but also for their empathy and commitment to making a positive impact in our community. Their original book shed light on this important issue and served as a powerful tool for advocacy and education. Moreover, their initiative to organize a book bag drive harnessed a practical approach to addressing the immediate needs of children experiencing homelessness, providing them with both comfort and resources for learning and growth. Ria and Joanna's leadership is a shining example of how one person's actions can make a meaningful difference in the lives of others. Congratulations to Ria Janashi and Joanna Pang for being honored at the Family and Children's Association's Fall Harvest Celebration. Would you all please come up? I think I'm being all nice and collaborative. I invite Miss Marcantonio up, and I remember she has a broken foot, so that's good on me. But I have to say, this is Miss Marcantonio. I ran into her a couple of weeks ago in Glenwood Landing, and she's moving from class to class with her broken foot, so positive, smiling, and it's no big deal. It's no big deal. It'll be, healed soon, and that's who she is for her colleagues and all of the Glenwood Landing students. Thank you for being here. Okay. Yes, yes. Okay. Congratulations to Avery McMahon for having her poem Bottle published in the American High School Poets in Like a Lion 2024 winter issue. As a poet, Avery is a dedicated wordsmith committed to strategic applications of language and the expression of universal and personal emotions. Receiving this honor conveys her skill at the art of arrangement and rhythm to convey her ideas. Sharing herself in verse is among the greatest use of such talent. We are so proud of Avery and of the High School Poetry Club advisor, Miss Rachel Donaton, for her achievement in this powerful language art form. Avery, would you please come up? Ms. Rodriguez, would you please come up? Ms. Rodriguez, our Director of the Fine and Performing Arts, does amazing work and is such a Viking innovator. We are going to start with an award from the Art League, but we also have Mr. Bromsey, our high school band director here. We have several music awards in just a minute. Thank you for being here both. The Art League of Long Island celebrates exceptional artwork as selected by their teachers of advanced placement art students throughout the island. Students selected to participate, their artwork demonstrates mastery of medium technique as well as artistic voice, vision, and imagination. The advanced placement exhibit took place at the Art League of Long Island and featured talented student artwork from Long Island schools. Congratulations to Elle Archer, Josie Crocco, and Mina Stickley. Would you please come up? Okay, we will now recognize our students who participated in the Long Island Strings Festival, LISFA. Long Island String Festival provides the opportunity for outstanding string players from each school district in Nassau County to come together to rehearse challenging orchestral repertoire over the course of a few days and to perform in a concert under the direction of distinguished conductors and music educators. Students are selected to participate in this prestigious music festival based on their NISMA scores and commitment to their musicianship. 3 elementary school students, 6 middle school students, and 7 high school students were invited to participate in this competitive music festival. Congratulations to all of these students, and we are going to call you up by level. So we're going to start with our students in grades 5 through 8 for the intermediate festival. Ian Bryant. Isabel Catan. Ann Kelly. Ava Kim. Jamie Coe. Sophie Koob. Mr. Aiden Phelps. Constance Wang. And Simon Zelkind. Okay, we're going to take a quick picture with everybody. And now our participants in the secondary LISFA Festival, grades 9 through 12. Siobhan Chung. Samantha Shi. Mika Okawa. Joanna Kim. Is Mr. Domingo having a rehearsal tonight? I have a feeling. Ellen Lemontowski. Graham Lippert. I know we have one, Luke Schweiger. Okay, Mr. Bromsey, again, thank you for being here. We will now recognize our New York State Band Directors Association event participants. Honor band members are chosen each year from hundreds of applicants statewide based upon scores in the New York State School Music Association evaluation process the previous spring. The band performs during NYSBDA's annual symposium in Syracuse, New York. Having prepared their music in advance, students convene and rehearse for 3 days, performing a concert at the end of the symposium. Selection to this prestigious ensemble demonstrates exceptional musicianship and is an outstanding accomplishment. This year, 4 middle school students and 4 high school students were invited to participate. We're going to bring our middle school students up first. Tate Duffy. Angelo Gisaitis. Ethan Marco. Ryan Marco. Alexandria Mastrantoni. Annalise Gamagas. Okay, and our high school NYSBDA participants. Mr. Seamus Hughes. Jessica Palin. Wade Livingston. And Julian Zazullo. Okay, and last but certainly not least, our American Choral Directors Association National Honor Choir participants. Welcome back, Mr. Rodriguez. Sorry. That's on me. The ACDA, American Choral Directors Association, is the premier and largest national choral directors organization that brings together the finest singers and clinicians from all over the country to participate in an annual conference focused on choral music. After being selected through a rigorous audition process, students rehearsed with master conductors and performed choral music at the very highest levels with other fine student musicians. This year, 3 middle school students from North Shore were invited to attend. And would these students please come up to be recognized? Miss Jillian Aceta. Christina Leach. And Declan Levine. Congratulations all. Thank you so much.
Congratulations to everyone. We are now, and you can stay for the meeting. At some point, we're going to be going line by line through the budget, probably until about midnight. It's a good excuse, kids, to stay up late.
Translation, you don't have to stay for the meeting.
You're no fun, Dr. Z. Thank you, everyone. Let's go to the approval of the minutes. The minutes are from February 29th. Do any of the trustees have any comments or amendments to the minutes?
Thank you, Betty. They're great, as always.
Thank you. Here. Hearing none, we'll accept the minutes as is. Action 7, the approval of the claims audit report for February 2024. Is there a motion? I heard a motion. Second?
Second.
Any comments, questions?
They're getting overshadowed by the crowd, but another great report from our business office. Thank you so much.
Any other comments? All in favor? Thank you. We're now going to move to the regular business portion of our meeting. We're going to be going, like I just said, line by line through the budget. Now, you can follow along at home, right, Dr. Z?
That's right, and I want to thank Ms. Campy for setting it up this way. We've organized each of the sections in the exact way they appear on the agenda as separate PDF documents. So if the trustees have their computer too, it's a little easier to open and close on board docs if you want to do it that way. You don't have to, but certainly if you're watching at home, it's easy to watch and click on the section that's being discussed.
Thank you. Yeah, you might notice it's kind of a
Sorry.
tradition. In budget season, we get a delivery to our house of a big giant binder that has every single item that you can think of, nuts and bolts and printer paper and how much they cost this year, what we expect them to cost next year. And so over the next 2 meetings, right, today and the next meeting, we will be going through each of this, and the trustees will be asking questions of everything there. So let's start with I'm gonna go just like how Betty has them set up. The general proposed budget pages 1 through 4. This part includes the general counsel, the Board of Education, we'll start there. The general counsel expenses, legal hearings expenses for the annual budget vote and election of trustees, conferences for board members, mandatory fiscal training for board members, legal expenses for LIPA, FOIL, Board of Property disputes, and so on. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Yes, Marianne.
Page 2, we have central office overtime.
We're just going to start with the Board of Education page first.
I thought it was the whole
What?
section.
Anything on the Board of Education? I felt a little bad that we're spending more.
have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the second line, which are legal hearings, it's shocking that in 2021, we spent $681,000 on that. I believe that was probably to fight a lot of the nuisance foils that really required a lot of battling. Almost 300,000 the year after, or over 300 the year after that. But we are currently in a period where that nuisance foiling, I guess after going 0 and 8, and I assume the people who foiled this wasted some of their resources as well, finally got the message that it wasn't going anywhere, so they stopped. So I wonder if that 150 is a safe number to keep, or if we think it's going to cover us, or we're just hopeful that it won't come back, and they're not going to come back, baselessly coming at us again just for their own pleasure.
It's one of those codes that, if there was activity of different kinds, it could, we could go over the budgeted amount. The last few years with COVID, with appeals, with foils, those things happening do raise you over what you've budgeted for that amount.
Okay, well, it's good to see that it's been going down, at least the actual expenditures. I had one more question, a very simple one. The 3850, about 6 lines down in memberships, that's our Nassau-Suffolk membership in the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association to help us advocate for hyper-local issues.
The increase, the amount.
The
of-
increase.
That's right. This year we joined the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards. They've been advocating for Long Island as a whole, but also the leadership of that organization has been very helpful to me in providing information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Okay, now we'll move on to central administration. This budget covers the salary of the superintendent of schools, his office staff, the business office, and auditing services and public information services. Any questions or comments? Marianne, I believe you had one.
I did. On central office clerical, there's significant numbers for overtime every year. I don't know if that's generated by the fact that you have to have confidential employees handle certain matters, or if we should be looking at the staffing to alleviate some of the overtime.
So Mr. Pappas and I are doing an overhaul of overtime across the district, and we started last year, around this time actually, with central office. It is partly what you say in terms of having certain specialized employees, for example, payroll, whenever we settle a contract and we have to do retro pay, there are specific things that come up that require overtime. We are continuing to look at some jobs that are overtime work that could become maybe better stipended positions, but we feel like we've made some significant progress on bringing that cost down because of the new way in which we're processing it.
It's correct. Thank you, Dr. Zubianis. I can also add that we've had some turnover in several of the departments, and that some of those numbers also reflect the fact that we've had maybe the person that sat in that position before come back for a short period of time for training, which also could tend to drive that number up. But
It's just consistently over, and so that begs the question for me, do we need to put more staff in? I'm not critical of the overtime. I'm just wondering if we've staffed it properly.
That's a great question that we ask of overtime in general, when we think about custodians, clerical. So we'll continue to look at that. I think certainly in personnel and some other areas, I think even though we're a small district, we're pretty lean central office. Folks work hard. So we'll continue to look at that.
See, if I could also kind of offer just a kind of the opposing view to that. We know that one of the major drivers of the increases in these budget are benefits, particularly health benefits. Having one person work and then work overtime doesn't actually add to the cost of those benefits because you're only paying that one person those benefits. And although you're paying that additional salary and overtime, having increased number of individuals increases those secondary costs, which also adds to the bottom line and to some degree perpetuity.
Piggyback, just to clarify for my own edification, Marion, you're talking about code 1310.160.90.3162, overtime central office staff?
25,000?
Yeah, so
I'm
Not that one.
Clerical overtime, it was, some years it's 20, other years it's 60. It's 25,000 budgeted. But
Yeah,
the numbers that we're looking at are more. And that is true, what they've said about the 1310, 160, 90, yes, 3162.
yeah. So I'm just wondering if that will be more instructive when we see the actuals for this year, because the 25,000 for this year is actually half of what it was the year before. So you clearly are trying to cut back on that.
We are addressing, trying to keep those numbers down, and we are trending lower. Can't say exactly where it would land at the end of this year, but
Any other questions on the other pages? Central administration went to page 4. Okay, hearing none, I will move on to facilities. Oh, the central services, facilities, and operation budgets covers the salaries of custodians, cleaners, part-time and substitute cleaners, new equipment, costs to maintain property and equipment, cleaning supplies, utilities, heating and ventilation services, as well as other contractual services to maintain the district's infrastructure.
I have a general question that can apply to multiple sections, since happen to be looking at one where we're looking at salaries. So in general, I just want to, again, for the benefit of everyone, when we see that there's a column of mostly increases and a few that are decreases, what we're essentially seeing there is a reflection of contractual agreements and perhaps either retirements or other reasons why a position would become open.
correct. Each one of these each one of the salary lines are built with actual individuals. So if somebody leaves and somebody new takes their place at a lower step, the salary would go down, even though it's the same number of people. And similarly, any other adjustments to the contracts would either drive that number up, or if somebody retires and it's not replaced, would drive that number down.
We're going to see the
So
same thing when we get to teachers. We're going to see the same thing with monitors and aides and other.
Correct. And in a couple of the codes where we were going through, we noticed where somebody might have been budgeted at one school and moved to another school at some point. So last year we made transfers to cover their salary because it was covered in a different. We tried to correct those. So you will see some where there are some going down and some going up. And it also has to do with the movement of people between schools.
Thanks, Jamie.
To Maria's point, we know that throughout this budget, as Dr. Z has said on the various sessions that you've held around the community to brief this budget, there are position eliminations throughout this in a relatively substantial way. So I just was curious about two larger reductions on this page, the two types of eliminations of position eliminations that you've discussed. Of course, there could be consolidation of other ones, but the two main are accessing positions, which means saying goodbye to someone who's part of our team, or not replacing through attrition when someone retires and or leaves for some other move. So I was curious if the high school custodial salaries and the security district wide, which are two lines that are being reduced, what categories those fall into?
I think in terms of security, we're looking at being smarter about how we assign security. So it's not really, it's actually, I'd say, a third category that we haven't talked about because we need folks, but we're being more smart about how we put folks in place for after school and weekends more than during the day. For the custodial lines, I think it is more, we're replacing folks, but they'd be making a lower salary. So we did not take positions out of custodial, and one reason was why is because we do want to look to turn one of these custodial positions into a grounds position, which we talked about in the fall, so we have more help on the outside of our buildings. So, that sometimes will not make a cut, so we can add a position in a budget neutral way.
I apologize for giving you just the two options. There's options 3, options 4, and probably other ones as well. Thank you.
No, but that is correct. Those are the two when it comes to the other personnel. That's exactly right.
Thank you.
this is actually more of a general question too, just because buildings and grounds is in this section, and we had the privilege of reading the narrative as.
Steal what I'm going to say. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, first of all, I would encourage everyone who's listening to go onto our website, and I think I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. It's under budget narratives and reports on the website, and you can all read the budget narrative. The budget narratives, because those narratives just give us so much information about what each of these lines mean. And we're talking about buildings and grounds right now, but even the buildings and grounds section is tied to our North Shore journey and our shared valued outcomes. And every single department gave us insight into what's happening into our buildings and just how wonderful the teaching and learning is in those buildings and how we are empowering our students to be successful in our schools and beyond. So I really, really appreciate the narratives because it just explains everything that's on these lines. And I also appreciate how much you tightened up this budget. We are in such a difficult financial situation here. We have to preserve our schools, yet we are trying to do the best we can for the taxpayer. And to have a 1.9% increase in this budget to budget increase in this kind of environment is just mind-boggling. So I have to say I worry a little bit about tightening too much. And in the buildings and grounds section, as you read through the narrative, we talk about the 1950s septic tanks and that they are not currently, slated for construction. And I just worry if we do have some kind of, significant unexpected costs or some kind of emergency repairs or, like, are we giving ourselves enough of a cushion? I mean, obviously we have done so. Our fiscal management has been, top notch. The reason that we have the high Moody rating is because you guys have done such a good job in, making sure that our reserves are where they should be. So that our interest rates are where they should be. So I just want to make sure, I'm comfortable if you are comfortable, but should we worry about those 1950s septic tanks or those unexpected emergencies?
Specifically, the septic systems that you talk about, they are older. I have spoken with the director of buildings and grounds, and what we are hoping to at some point replace them all at once because. As he explained, you can replace one and another can go. There's no way of telling which, and they could last another 20 years. Obviously, we want to plan and replace them. So there's no sure way of telling if one were to fail where it would. So to replace one and then find out the one next to it fails just after that. We do have a repair reserve. So in the event that we had a catastrophic something like that happen, we would be able to fix it. And we do build in maintenance and some other things into the budget. So specifically with that and anything else that major would happen, we do have a repair reserve that we would have to tap into to fix that. But long term, we're looking to replace them all at once.
I know, I noticed that and I don't remember which line it was, but we do have, maintenance of the tanks and maintenance of the cesspool. So I know we're on top of it, but it is concerning when you see 1950s, but okay. I think I have other questions as we go through the pages, but
Like anything up to page 10.
I don't have much to say other than I wanted to highlight that I echo Trustee Colasiopo's encouragement of people reading these narratives, which are so interesting and helpful. And since we have such a nice group here, I thought I would highlight that I thought I was really impressed by the fact that we have 525,000 square feet of building space and 65 acres of grounds. I knew it was a lot of space, but those numbers are kind of staggering and worth sort of mentioning that it makes sense that we have to maintain that. And something that, the way that we're talking about the budget it is a little bit differently, but something that came out of the community budget forum that I kind of just wanted to highlight in the context of the grounds was we when we looked at the budget from an annual monthly expenditure at one point, and we saw that labor in the summertime was more available and less expensive. So I just kind of wanted to throw that. It's not really built into the way that the narrative that we're talking about currently, but I know it's something that we spoke of in terms of utilizing resources and mobilizing resources to get some of these groundwork done. So I thought, I would memorialize that conversation in the context of grounds. And then I thought also what I found so helpful, especially as a trustee in it for only 2 years, because there's so much historical data in this narrative, that before I was on the board, there was a choice, understandably, to defer some planned capital improvements because of our massive need during COVID and all of the infrastructure requirements there. But there's a pretty clear list of what we deferred at that time that is, it lists the septic. I also share concerns about sewage. But I think, for anybody interested, seeing some of the things that are, as this enormous landover of 65 acres of grounds that, we all have to consider, it's not a comprehensive list, but within the narrative is a very useful roadmap of potentially a future capital reserve or, things that we have to be thinking about. So I thought that was really helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, does anyone mind if I had a couple of other things? Thank you. So
2 Lisas are holding court.
sorry. On page 8, I just wanted to point out, because it's come up in athletic advisory, we've talked a lot about the poison ivy, like at the middle school. And so on page 8, under, I don't know, the 15th line, we do have poison ivy control for the middle school there. So I just wanted to point out that we are trying to take care of it. And then,
The audience can't see that there are other audience members clapping. So.
And then my only other question is on page 10, 1620.47200, water. So it looks like water has been, the past few years, kind of somewhere between 46,000 and 53,000. Last year, for some reason, we had 70,000, and this year we have 50,000. So I just want to make sure we don't think water's, is the cost of water going down? I just want to make sure we're not under budgeting. I'm sure we're not, but I just wanted to
We have always hovered about that $50,000 line, and I think the number was higher in previous years as well, and we were only at about $50,000. So in really reassessing the budget and trying to find out where we maybe had some room to avoid cutting other things, that was an area.
The other thing I want to say is, at the end of the building and grounds narrative, the quote is just wonderful, so I'm going to read it out loud. Education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than you found it.
Anything on plant maintenance? Go ahead, Dave.
I do. So either Jamie or Chris, if you could just kind of very, very, very short version, just kind of explain to the community the energy performance contract into which we entered and how we can see reductions in cost as a result of that in this area, guaranteed reductions in cost?
But, Mr. Pappas handled that one, but we might have the ability for that company to come speak to the board. So I just want to put that out there, and we'll get that out to everybody for anybody who's interested in watching.
We are hoping before the end of the year that there's a date that works for all. And but the way the energy performance contract works, we borrow based on the level of savings that we will achieve over a number of years, and the savings will pay back the cost of our borrowing. That's in the perfect world, and that's how it's structured, and that's how we're guaranteed. And that allows us to put in new lighting, new machinery, new ovens, new things throughout the district, new air conditioners to cut down on the cost of our utilities and other things, which will continue to save us money as we move forward. But that's a very nice way. And what's built into that as well is if we can get a certain amount of savings, even above and beyond, we can then utilize those funds to do other projects that may not be of a energy saving, but it allows us to finance other projects through that energy savings even going forward.
It did include some solar as well. So the cost of the actual, obviously not water per se, but electric, gas, those are things that we'll see reducing lines over time. Obviously, our buildings and students are not using any less of those resources, and the cost of them continues to go up, in some cases steeply. But the reductions that we invested in should show reduced demand on the budget in those areas.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Say it's really twofold. The more green energy like solar that reduce the cost, but also like usage controls that are just smarter in terms of heating, but also use shut off times, things like that throughout the district.
Section. Okay, we will move the
Can I-
next.
Go ahead. I just want to amplify that, the cost saving, but also, you mentioned green energy, but it's also the footprint, the carbon footprint is reduced as well, which is added kind of global benefit.
Thank you. Very good point. The next section, transfer to capital, special aid, proposed budget, page 47, if you're looking on board docs. We'll start with debt service and interfund transfers. The district borrows money from financial institutions to build, renovate, purchase large fixed equipment and pay it back over time. Debt service is part of the budget, covers the principal and the interest on serial bonds, bands, TANs. Questions on this?
The reduction, sorry,
Go ahead, David.
the reduction in the two interest lines, Bantan and also transfer to debt service interest, the reduction in those allocations versus the increase in the transfer to debt service principal, is that related to the fact that obviously while rates are still much higher than we wanted, they are down from where they were a couple years ago at the height of inflation's still a problem, obviously, but at the height of inflation. Sorry.
No, that is absolutely correct. And with our short term, one of the things that we have to do when we take out a short term borrowing as a band is you must pay back a certain percentage of principal. So in the short term, it may drive that principal number up, but the interest rate is going down. So we are, doing better in terms of interest. And once we get the ability to borrow for the long term, we'll have those lower interest rates going forward.
Our principal is going down as a result of this, or the principal holding steady as we go through this sort of intermediate period?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
There are questions? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I did have the question. The high school press box, which is the project that's listed kind of in the last section there, 9950-900-00. Are we still hopeful that there could be a potential grant to offset that?
Well, that would actually be in conjunction with this funding to complete the entire project. So that the project that we want to do would include the grant funding from Assemblyman Levine in conjunction with this budgeted amount.
Capital line, that line essentially was used to, I guess a couple years ago, this section, that was a couple years ago, was used to redo the high school gym floor, which was many decades old. And has been an improvement for our kids, not related to the successful basketball teams, but couldn't hurt. And then last year, in conjunction with reallocating capital reserves to help redo the turf field, this is that same line. This is the portion of the budget that is allocated to those things.
This is a good example of what we tried to do in preparing this budget by trying to look at the non-instructional costs first and not, that's why I think the question of are we going too far is such a good question, because that was the question we asked in this line, in these lines, the custodial, the maintenance, and capital, because we knew the project that we were really looking for here, so that would work. But when you think of that cut of around $140,000, that's like a teacher's salary or more, and so that's how we were thinking of it. That making that sacrifice there enables us to keep one more teacher.
We still keep an investment in the physical plant in this area that you've identified as an area of need, but reducing it by that 140 to be able to save a position that more directly affects student experience.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, no, I need to clarify one more time. So back to the question before, then that will be more than covered by the grant money that we hope to receive. That no, and Aunt Lisa's shaking her head, but Chris isn't.
It would be the two funding sources for the project that we were hoping to use both funding sources. I don't know if Jamie,
I think when they originally went out to redo the press box, the amount was roughly about $300,000 to do everything that needed to be done. We were able to get a grant for half of that, and we felt that rather than doing part of it, we would, with this capital fund, we would be able to do the intended project that we had when they went out for the bond. I think that was one of the items that may have been removed from the bond at that time.
And the refurbishment of the middle school water vault?
That is the railroad ties and water vault in front of right at the front entrance. It currently has the lattice around it, and it was in need of replacement and repair. So before we put up a nice wall or do something permanent to fix for beautification, we need to replace and fix the vault.
Do you anticipate that could be covered by the same two funding
That
sources?
is why it's covered by the entire $210.
Okay.
Half a portion, roughly $60,000 for the vault, and the remainder for the press box.
Is that if it comes in under budget, the way the high school gym floor does, that goes directly into fund balance if it's a capital project, or it stays in this line? Is it different than general fund balance?
Anything that, if it comes under budget, anything would eventually, once the project is closed, come back to as a general fund revenue and in essence go to fund balance. We would budget in the following years for more projects on that same line, but yes.
Thank you.
Just one other question. I think I know the answer to this, but historically, we are not currently, I know it's not transportation, but it's part of fund movement. Historically, we budget for a new bus. There's a change in the landscape of technology, and we're not currently do that. But that's where this line would come into play as well.
There is actually a separate line for transportation equipment, and we do have one small bus budgeted on that line for next year, because many of our buses are close to 20, if not 20 years older. So
I think I'm conflating it, because when we did utilize the money for the gym floor, maybe was that the shell game that we played at that time?
was money that was originally on the transportation equipment line that they reduced, took it off of the transportation equipment line and moved it to this line for that gym floor capital project.
Okay, let's move to transportation. District provides transportation for kindergarten through 12th grade. We have this amazing bus depot. We own our own school buses, and our bus drivers are district employees. And of course, it should be noted that students attending private and parochial schools who live within 15 miles of their home are entitled to transportation as long as they submit that request to the district by April 1st. So any comments or questions?
Yeah, just that line that Trustee Cashman just referenced. It's got the two lines here, the 51,000 and the 87,000.
$87,000 is for the purchase of a bus. We've been utilizing the small buses a lot more, which is certainly more efficient than having the large bus. And when speaking with the Director of Transportation, that was something that, because the other buses are getting older, was a request. With regard to the $51,000, in anticipation of the electric buses, and also because we have had several districts come to us for repairs and DOT inspections, our lifts currently can't carry certain buses. For instance, there's a school district that approached us and they have a bus one size larger than our largest buses. So that $51,000 is for portable jacks that will give us the ability to now not only repair our own buses and then have another place to repair our own buses outside, but will also allow us to attract maybe more buses coming in from other districts.
Brings in revenue.
Right.
I have a question. I noticed, I was very happy to see that there's some increase in spending, budgeting for additional field trips at the elementary school level, but we kept our transportation field trip line the same. So I just want to make sure that's not going to be an issue.
Don't believe so, but
Okay.
we do believe we can cover it with that, and it was more with regard to the fees and other things that would the trips would cost at the elementary schools.
Okay, thank you. Marianne, did you have something?
Transportation contract buses. I assume that some of these are for private schools.
That is correct. That is those that are outside of the district and more cost effective to utilize those than send our own buses.
So I know that we do the transportation to Lehigh and Chaminade, any place where we have enough students to make it worthwhile. So these other ones, do we have any idea how many students are being transported? I was kind of surprised at some of the distances they're going.
I don't have the information right now, but I
Was
will
in
get
the
it for you
narrative.
in the.
Yeah.
Bid out, right? We bid these every year.
They are both by the transportate. There's a consortium of for transportation as well as those that are bid out, and they do a cooperative bid for all of these for all of the districts.
These are bid contracts.
Jamie or Chris, I'm not sure. Just back to the actual purchasing of new bus equipment. I mean, assuming this is just a calculus you have to make every year, given the environment in which we keep hearing that electric buses are being mandated, maybe the date is being pushed back. Since you say as we do have a fleet that is aging, we long ago used to buy one bus fairly frequently, every year or every other year. And we don't really have the means to do that now, nor obviously is the specific need, but you are evaluating that every year, I take it, just because it's a changing landscape in terms of the electric bus mandate.
Absolutely. We've met with several different companies and sat down with the director of transportation to talk about that and where we would stand. And even many of those said, if you're going to, the first thing is the infrastructure. So that's probably what we will concentrate on first, because it will happen. And we want to be ready for that. But I guess I also kind of say, don't be the first one out into the intersection to get to buy the new bus, and then whatever problems come with that. So we're very closely monitoring that. So
I'm not sure if anyone took the survey from NISPA, but one of the questions was about should NISPA advocate against the electric bus mandate. So, a lot of school districts are obviously, especially, are just don't have the funding to change over. So, and Mary, I just want to tell you, it's on page 20 of the non-instructional narrative. Yes. Yep.
For the
Sorry.
trust, sorry.
I just wanted to a postscript on the previous discussion. So we're seesawing back and forth between these two, but I just wanted to point out something that folks may have heard. Of course, there's this big Environmental Bond Act from the state, and there's a lot of publicity around the fact that it's got lots of money in it for things like electric buses, but that, in fact, is something we have looked into quite specifically, and found that money is really not available to us. It is based on various measures of need in a community, and we don't meet those requirements.
and we have applied for on two separate occasions grants that we were denied, but we'll continue to and keep looking into that.
Just adding quickly that for those trustees who don't have the benefit of sitting in construction and steering, this is a monthly update. This is a monthly conversation, and we're monitoring this actively. So we're on it.
Thank you. All right, anything else? Nope. All right, we'll move to supervision of instruction. The supervision of instruction budget covers the salaries of the assistant superintendent for instruction, building principals, directors, clerical and secretarial support, professional development, instructional software, as well as expenditures to maintain their offices. So we can go through any of the pages here. It's 13 through what, 17? Maria?
I just wanted to ask if we could start on hearing a little bit about the grant offset that we see there that I think is a really nice chunk of money to see coming off the expenses.
We do receive grants and we apply those to the expenditures. I have to recall offhand exactly what that particular grant was.
These are actually, these are the title grants for this. I believe this is Title II that we, in prior years, would use for literacy, teachers college in some years. We've moved away from that. Dr. Smythe is working on a new approach with Julie Ritter. So we can use that offset now in other ways, which is something we had talked about, many years. So that is helpful.
We did use it for teachers college.
So they are typically renewable every year, or?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
okay.
do receive titles 1, 2, 3, and 4 every year. And one is Title 1, just quickly, is for instructional services. We can use that for staff. 2 is we could use for PD and supplies. 3 is for our E&L or immigrant students. And Title 4 is sometimes we share with Greenvale or schools within our border, professional development. It's a smaller amount. All in all, totaling those 4 grants about $90,000 to $105,000.
Coaches are not captured here. They'd be captured under regular instruction.
This is
Advisory.
the Title I grant is where you would see a closer connection to that, but those grants usually go towards reading and intervention teachers and not coaches or other teachers.
Of those grants for salaries is actually reflected in that lump sum when we put a salary onto those. If there's a teacher that a portion of their salary is being paid with one of those grants, it's included in the salary lines in here.
Other questions or comments? It's going to bring it up in new business. We'll bring it up now. I don't think the trustees know that Carol and Olivia Walsh and Dr. Kate worked very hard on submitting a grant for the American Psychological Foundation for $50,000. We haven't won yet, but so when they do win, where does that money go, Jamie? It just gets applied. Does it go into general fund, or does?
I believe we would use it for the purposes for which it would, so it would come in as a revenue and offset the cost of what we're using it for.
Programs. Okay. They are hard at work to bring in more money. Okay. We are going to move regular instruction, pages 18 through 25.
I have one here, and yet another shout out about the narratives on page C20 of the narratives. I think it's just incredibly encouraging and useful to see the description about the AP and IB programs that we run and how much they enrich our student experiences. And in reference to them, I believe, if I interpreted this correctly, line 2110.400-50, this is page 19, labeled regular school other expense, actually is primarily, or at least partly, the fees that we pay for those exams, right? That are not paid by many other schools. It was just interesting. I'm sorry, Chris, just my last comment, but I want to hear you. That if since you're nodding, I'm going to assume that's mostly correct. it was interesting to see that it isn't. I mean, it's a chunk of money, but it's nothing what I feared it would be. It isn't a huge amount. It's significant, but it's not what I was afraid it could be.
And it's kind of a double-edged sword because we want our students, of course, to take these exams and have those opportunities that will help them beyond North Shore. Paying for them just makes it so much easier. It's an equity piece as well. We have talked about this since it is non-instructional. The amount is it's about $110,000 to $115,000 offhand in total when you add up, all of the exams for all the students. We do not pay for optional exams. For example, a student who's taking IB history in 11th grade, which is the only honors social studies course we offer, they might opt to take the AP history exam. We would not pay for that because they're opting. It's for the exams that are the terminal exams in the courses that they're taking.
This did come up, though. It was interesting. I mean, in terms of the equity piece, it really does feel important. It came up just the other night in one of the budget presentations with high school parents, and it is. I mean, I think many of us feel that where we want our children to be able to take advantage of everything, but all the various fees that come at us for many different things really do add up. So having this one, does feel very much like it covers a lot of students for whom it could otherwise be difficult.
Historically, we didn't pay for them. We only started paying for the exams when IB came in, and that was part of the requirements, I think, of the IB program. That's when we started paying for the exams. Rich and I are filing for refunds for all the AP exams we paid for over the years. But it came into being with the IB program. Those exams are much more expensive than the AP exams. And I believe my understanding was at the time, and maybe this is or is not true, that the IB organization, I think, required us as part of the implementation of the program to pay for the exams. You would know, Rich, better than I would.
Was when the IB courses were instituted here, the exams are a requirement for the program. So since it's a requirement for successful completion of the program, the district is obliged to provide the funding for that. It's analogous to calculators on math exams, for example. So because each student is permitted to have one, we're obliged to provide them. So because it was a stipulation that was part of successful completion of the course, district had to pay for them. In terms of the AP exams prior to that, it was never clearly stated in our course catalogs that the AP exam was a requirement for the particular course. It was implied, but because it wasn't specifically stated, the students and families were on the hook for the fees. Once the situation changed and we started providing IB exams, it was felt that it should be put in that if the student's going to be taking an AP class, the AP course should be a requirement, so therefore we pay for it.
The only thing I'd add is that's 100% true and agree. There is wild variation with what high schools do here, like everything else. Like we were talking about midterm and finals weighting last year. Same thing, whether or not the course for AP or IB is a requirement. IB is a little different with the diploma. So if we're just talking about AP, some schools will require it to get course credit and not pay for the exam. So we do see a lot of variation out there.
Just as a postscript to that, could you talk about the difference between that line we just discussed and on page 21, the high school state mandated expenses line? At first, I thought that was the fees that we pay to cover the exams, but I realize now it's two different lines and probably two different things.
And that is correct. And as Chris had mentioned, it's roughly, both exams are roughly about $110,000. And if they're reflected in that state mandated costs.
Okay, so so the one on page 21 is also, it's the same category, that's just breaking out AP registration fees?
Both AP and IB are in the state mandated costs on, yes, where is it? 2110 40150.
Ah.
The AP is the first line and the IB is the last line in that breakdown.
Thank you, Jamie, thanks, okay, got it. Okay.
So I just did a quick search. It's $100 for an AP test and $130 for an IB test. So there is a difference, but it's kind of ballpark there. I did want to say, Chris, when you are going around to the community, doing your budget presentations, as we're calling it, I think one key difference, it's subtle, but I think it's something that matters, is it's somewhat different in past years where you or other superintendents before you would go around and explain where the budget is and what we've done. And this year, you've really titled them as more of an interrogative, which is what makes us us, what makes us special and unique as a district that we don't want to lose. And I think about this specific thing and the equity piece and encouraging all of our students to take these classes. At that high school presentation, one of the things that came up very early was the idea that parents felt their students all had an opportunity. There are schools right near us on Long Island who have very strict GPA requirements to get into these classes and won't let their students have that opportunity. There are schools very close to us in Long Island that don't allow their special ed population to take very many of these tests unless with higher barriers. And one of the things that I think we heard, and this is the question, is it something we want to preserve, is allowing all of our students to take classes. Obviously, we have a very strong counseling department that can tell kids, hey, you're taking all AP and IB classes and you have a 64 average, maybe you're not going the right direction. But still encourages students to explore these areas of interest. So students who may struggle in math but love the social sciences can take a class in that area or vice versa. And we heard a lot of positive feedback from there. And so I'm not sure directly if the paying for testing addresses that aspect of it, but I think it is indicative of our approach to that and the fact that paying for those things does allow students of all means to be able to take those exams is something that is reflective. There was what I would term a pretty brave parent at that high school presentation who talked about their family struggle and saying that, you know, yeah, $20 field trip ticket here and a $30 shirt for sports night or whatever. I don't know, $30 is probably less, but whatever they are, those things add up. And for us, that is the kind of thing that makes a difference, whether we can really afford to live here. And it was really powerful when that parent talked about that. And so the idea that, yeah, $100 exam, $130 exam, which could end up saving you thousands of dollars in college down the road because you can place out, but that those tests that are required to pass those tests, $100 isn't a decision that a family has to make and say, I don't want to put my kid in that position, so I won't have them have that opportunity. I think that is something that is, yes, it's about the total. I'm not looking at it right now. My glasses are in my hand, not in my eyes, so I can't see exactly. But I think it was $46,000 when I just looked at it. I think that is the kind of thing where we're getting a lot of value for our dollars and being able to open that experience to all of our students. Because, yes, we live in many ways, affluent community, but that is not 100% of our community. And there are people of many different means who live here, and we want our students to have an equitable experience. So to me, that line, I'm glad you raised it, Trustee Mosca, because it is something that creates that equity and allows all of our students to have that kind of a short experience, if they so choose, that they wouldn't otherwise have, maybe because of those financial constraints.
And today it's super quick. We'll talk about this in our college admissions post North Shore presentation that we're working on, but you've probably heard, infamously over the February break, Yale saying they're moving away from test optional and other colleges are following suit. And a big driver of that is what you just said. It is that equity piece for our students who can't afford the club sports teams, the other out of school opportunities. A lot of these universities feel like, well, tests is more of an equalizer. But then the next question is, and because they're including AP tests in lieu of the ACT or the SAT in their policy, do they have access then to the test? So that's something I think we have to consider.
I have a question. I was really interested in the monitors. So we have a decrease, page 18. We have a decrease in school monitors at Glen Head, Glenwood, Seacliff, and the high school, but then we actually have this large increase in the middle school for monitors. So I was just curious what the thinking was there.
There's an internal leadership team joke how Dr. O'Hara is stealing from Mr. Contreras all of the resources from the high school, but this is, I would say this is a correction that the increase in monitors at the middle school, and in all honesty, Mr. Contreras, Dr. Curse have been great, all of the principals, in sharing this. Part of the increase in prior years was due to COVID. I think we had more monitors for recess and the way we had lunch structured at the elementary schools, different times. We've moved away from that. But we've really, in kind of building back the middle school, looking at supervision with a new assistant principal too, we've looked for areas where there was insufficient supervision. For example, if we went downstairs right now by the gym, the nurse's office, and the locker rooms, we never had monitors in that area on a consistent basis. We this year put a monitor there. We did the same in other hallways, and it has made a huge difference. Just that presence has made a huge difference in tightening up some of the behaviors and also being able to help students, quite frankly.
And at the end of last year, we did that survey, and I remember it was so unusual that a large percentage of middle school students reported that they felt unsafe in the hallways. And I remember saying to you, like, what are we going to do? We're going to do something. And so I'm guessing this is part of what you've been doing.
Yeah, I and if you're in the middle school especially, and if you've taught middle school like I have, when the bell rings, the halls, even in the best of middle schools like ours is, it is just naturally a little chaotic in the volume. I think Dr. O'Hara did a lot of work with traffic flow or people flow also, but I do think that's why children feel that way, probably especially our sixth graders, because they're coming from very safe, secure, cozy environments that we love, but to just like the natural traffic flow.
Go ahead.
I had a question and a comment, and I think they're quick. The big shifts in the cost of teacher salaries for Glen Head and Glenwood that are up, and Seacliff it's down. That's a demographic change. That's just where the kids are right now. It's at the very top of page 18. It's directly tied to where the sections are needed.
That is correct, and we did have retirements, I think, in Seacliff that are reflected in this number, which is why they came down. And when I spoke earlier about maybe a person that was budgeted at one school but really at the other, this is specifically one of the areas where I was talking about.
So this is more directly aligned with where they're actually going to be. Right. And then even the English language learners is so clear. Like we're basically down a position at the middle school, but up at the high school. I assume that those kids moved up?
Correct.
Okay. And then the other question to President McCarry's point a few minutes ago, on page 21, the numbers for field trips are up a very little bit, but really a little bit. So I just want to reinforce that's an area that I would love to. I think there's a lot of good value in this book, but that's a tremendous value. And so for a total of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 grand for the entire district for the year in field trip entry fees, I think that's an area that I'd be comfortable making a budget transfer down the road if that's the way you want to handle it next year, to send more kids. We live next to this incredibly dynamic city that I know our students get tremendous value out of. And we live around tremendous resources right here they don't need to travel for. That's an area I'd love to see a continued investment.
Thank you for bringing that up. Lisa Cashman.
I took something else from the narratives in each department that I thought was interesting, and I thought it was kind of a interesting case study in that in social studies in particular, there's an increase. First of all, across the board, pretty much every department was able to find efficiencies, which, pat everybody on the back for really coming together and doing that. So that was really heartening and encouraging. But in particular, even though it was net negative, the social studies department also managed to add 2 college courses in the context of the offerings for the high school, based on student demand. And I thought it's such an interesting case study of the conundrum of finding efficiencies for the budget, because for $8,000 incremental increase and a net negative total budget, we're getting these incredible opportunities. So, you know, when we are increasingly trying to find efficiencies, as well we should, but in terms of, you know, because we want to be efficient, overusing that word, but also we're mindful of the taxpayers and the increasing burden on the taxpayers. However, that cost benefit analysis of the use of this money and creating or losing opportunities for kids, you know, even if we were to lose something, making that kind of more, meaning make a shift, would that save the taxpayers? And so it kept, that was kind of the question in my mind when I'm evaluating all these programs. All right, does losing this save money for taxpayers? And, or, as I've heard you say in many different conversations, where are those kids going to go? And so what's the incremental shift going to be? So I don't know if I'm making my point salient at this point. Are we past my time of making sense in the evening? But I was really so struck by that as sort of the demonstrative of this educational conundrum that we're in as a school district.
So just to piggyback off of Trustee Cashman, I also thought that there were so many innovative ways of cost savings in the narratives. And one of the ones that I did want to point out was, especially in math and science, that the teachers are creating their own material instead of using textbooks. And, you know, I mean, again, I trust our teachers probably more than, you know, some of the textbook writers. So I think it's great to see those kinds of innovations. So, you know, again, we have the taxpayer in mind, we have our students in mind, and, you know, we're creating opportunities for them even while shrinking the budget. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one.
Yeah, just one other question on page 23. I was wondering if you could speak to the fairly large increase in elementary humanities supplies. Just thought it would be instructive to hear that out loud.
It's a new curriculum for, I believe, English and ELA, right?
Yeah, for the science of reading, I'll let Carol.
Hoping it would give Carol an opportunity.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of work around the science of reading, and we know we need to buy new materials to help kids meet those needs. It's really around 2 strands. One, helping kids be better at decoding words, and then building language comprehension, reading comprehension over time.
I had a question on page 24. The last line, the BOCES tuition regular school. We have $65,000 budgeted, and then it says outdoor seashore ecology and performing arts. But then in another area, I guess code 2280, are the BOCES occupational education codes. So I'm just curious what the difference is.
Actually, I was going to mention this before we were mentioning field trips. That outdoor education fund through BOCES funds a lot of our field trips to things like Garvey's Point, ComSet, a lot of our elementary field trips, and actually some of our middle school and high school get funded through that first code. And then the second one is really fine and performing arts programs, where we might bring in an artist or something along those lines.
The tuition title in that code is a little misleading. It's like tuition for these individual small programs, but not like the OCED.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else in this section? I'm going to move to special education. The district is required to provide all resident students with disabilities a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment to comply with each student's IEP. This budget supports the salaries of all SPED teachers, speech and language pathologists, OTs, teacher assistants, and teacher aides, as well as tuition for students placed outside the district. and resources to comply with the IEPs of these students. So this is a big budget driver. Okay.
I'm sorry, the section includes St. Christopher's.
Yes.
So could I just ask about page 29? The mini narrative at the top tells us that we are responsible for the education and transportation of up to 6 school-age children placed at St. Christopher's, but we're only budgeting for 3 next year, and that's just because, I mean, we have a way of knowing that that's all we're going to have.
Correct.
Okay.
But yes.
We don't anticipate that wouldn't change mid-year, or wouldn't be likely to change mid-year.
And it could. Right at this point, we're expecting 3 students. And with that would come the reimbursement, which we get through St. Christopher's if we did get that. So,
Right, so
10
this
additional
is not
students.
only I guess a good decrease, but also is money that will be reimbursed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's reflected on the revenue side.
Right, thank you.
We have no individual residential placements. At the bottom of 29?
Not that fall into the chapter 721.
Okay.
Ask a question, going back to page 27. I guess it may not be 27, but Dr. Z, you've kind of championed a burgeoning program to be able to utilize the strength of our special ed program to attract out-of-district residents as a revenue generator. I guess my two-part question is, where's that shown here? The revenue is probably in another area, of course, but then, of course, the other side of that equation, the T account, if you will, is the cost and how you measure that. So the cost is somehow embedded in here, and the revenue is done separately. Is there a separate accounting in some way to be able to, really quantify the specific net gain that we get from all this?
We could provide that to you because it is embedded. It's embedded in tuition and other revenues on the revenue side. And on the cost side, it's embedded in special ed teachers, CCLIF, because that's where the program is housed, the ABA program for students in K through 2, the K through 2 band right now, and also aides and monitors as well for students who have higher needs. The benefit of overall revenue that we get from other districts who pay a state tuition amount that allows us then to provide that service to our own resident students who would otherwise have to go out of district. So there's that benefit. It keeps North Shore students in North Shore, and the parents are very grateful for that. But there is a slight revenue that comes out of that as well.
I assume there's a marginal cost and marginal profit, so to speak, benefit to it, which obviously once you have the cohort, you don't need more space, you don't need more room, you don't need more heat. But at some point, if you get to a level of 5 students or 8 students or 12 students, then you would need additional personnel.
That's right, and also as the grade level changes, so that's where we'll have to look. If we have incoming students and the students who are currently here, they're getting older. The grading system works differently with special classes, but the state wants you to keep it within 2 or 3 grades. So
Okay.
that's part of it too. But to your point, we also do have tuition paying students that come to programs that are already existing, our life skills program, our ILC program at Seacliff. And so those programs are already there, and they're really, unless there's an aid added, there is no additional there's no marginal cost. It's just the tuition getting paid.
And we've seen in the past when this program first started, there are different levels at which the district of residence pays. So I assume the relative level of need, if they need an additional aid, they need an additional support, translator or someone who's visually impaired, et cetera. Those things are part of the bill, so to speak, to the district of residence.
That's right. There are basically 2 calculation methods. I'm looking at Mr. Pappas because we've had a lot of conversations about this. There's basically a flat rate that is a little bit over $100,000. And then there's an a la carte rate per service rate. And so it depends on the individual student which rate that we choose. That is then in a contract that we approve. We have a contract on the agenda tonight for a student. The North Shore is paying another district for in a similar way. And you can see how that contract is modeled.
And to add, while some of those students that may have higher needs and the cost is higher, it's a reimbursement of those costs. So while it may not be a revenue in terms of having something over and above that, we have the ability, now we're not sending our own student out someplace else, so that they're sharing costs. So we are saving on that side. So it doesn't equate to maybe a revenue on the revenue side, but it's a savings for not sending our students someplace else for similar services because we have the program in-house and the fact that they get to stay in-house.
It's great. I didn't think about it that way, but that's certainly clear.
And no, I think that's a big point. This
Yeah.
idea that often you look at these lines and you think, oh, this is money you are spending. But actually, in many of these instances, you're actually saving enormous money. And just take a look at the special ed tuition, the private tuitions here, right? We have 17 students who are going to out-of-district placements. And if you look at the cost, they range as high as $170,000 a student. So if we are able to keep them in-house, right, they're able to stay in their community and their neighborhood school. There's so many benefits that go above and beyond even the cost savings to the district. I will say I'm a little nervous that there's only one contingency position on that, and we're budgeting only $50,000 for it. It's page 27.
And that is typically what we have a fairly good handle on what those numbers will be going forward, and we've carried that $50,000 for a number of years and looking back.
Okay. And I should make the note that as you've been going around talking to the community, a lot of special education parents are very nervous thinking that the special education budget was going to be cut, but actually there's an increase in this department this year, correct?
That's correct, because we have a legal and a moral obligation, but in the end, it's legally mandated. We are doing a review. We're looking at our internal review of special education, like I mentioned before, but that really isn't about cost cutting. It is about improving the service for students. I think with all areas, even at the secondary level, when we think of special education, there are some efficiencies we could find in terms of the way people are scheduled, the way shared staff works, but that will not impact students and the services that they receive.
Other questions? Okay, let's keep going. Occupational continuing ed proposed budget, page 30, if you're looking on board docs. So other instruction, occupational continuing ed. This budget covers tuition for vocational education, evening adult education programs, and the cost of summer remedial programs for high school students. It is anticipated that 33 11th and 12th graders will enroll in vocational programs next year, and anticipated that 5 students will enroll in the Long Island High School for the Arts. And I know that this board is very, very proud of our ability to send our students to career and technical education programs and to BOCES. We had a presentation last year about it, and I know that everyone was very excited, and the conversation really was, how do we make sure students know this is available? So I know, Dr. Z, there's been a lot of talk in the community that we were going to stop sending students to these programs. Can you clear up some of that miscommunication?
Sure. So we participate in about 45 different BOCES programs, including a few programs at the Long Island High School for the Arts. And we are honoring students who are there currently so they can finish. But as we've built up certain programs here, dance, theater, and other fine and performing arts programs that might be redundant to some of the programs at the Long Island High School for the Arts, we are counseling students into staying at North Shore for those programs that are very similar. But there is still a vast array of courses at all of the BOCES schools that are clearly not in courses and programs that we could offer here at North Shore, and we still honor those and advertise those and make those available to our students.
It's about 40 programs.
Yeah, I believe it's 45 or 46.
45.
There are 4 or 5 specifically at the Long Island High School for the Arts that we're deeming redundant for new students to enter, but honoring the commitment that we've already made to students in those programs now. But even within the Long Island High School for the Arts, there are some programs that aren't redundant that we would honor.
Thank you. All right, let's keep going. Library audiovisual, pages 31 to 32. This is other instruction. Library and audiovisual budget supports the library program, including library books, online databases, video conferencing software, audiovisual supports for large groups, including parents, and Board of Ed meetings. It also includes the budget to loan library materials to the Greenvale School, which is located within the North Shore School District. Any questions or comments on this?
Just, this is a, a large decrease in I think it's about $70,000 in this section. So I was just wondering, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this in advance, but just, what the rationale was for, basically cutting all of the audiovisual and, in the different schools. Is it that we just think our equipment is like newer and up to date, that we won't need new equipment? Or I guess, I just need clarification.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. This was part of our effort to find non-instructional costs. And we believe there are a lot of redundancies between some of the materials here and the technology code, even though we worked with Mr. Kay and Dr. Smythe to find some cuts in the technology code. But I think, we did find some issues too with, some of this budgeting's for older equipment that we don't use as much anymore. We're using more Chromebooks and portables versus desktop computers. We don't, we've built these new STEAM labs. We don't have the computer labs anymore. A lot of that code was really fashioned for that. So.
On the other side of the coin, books. So at the middle school and high school, they're flat, but over the past 4 years, they've seen an increase. The elementary schools, which obviously have been, unfortunately due to extended work, somewhat dormant and or displaced, have seen kind of are seeing some reductions in the purchasing of books this year. I wasn't sure if that was a recommendation, how that comes to be.
It really is a matter of looking at the catalog, looking at purchases that we've made in years past, and looking at what we might need to replace. So I think we feel like the volumes are strong. I can just tell you from personal experience that the Seacliff Library has a very large, it's a bigger library, and so that's what explains that small differential there. But you're exactly right. I remember when we were all first doing the walkthroughs for the bond. And I think it was one of the architects said, so do you want to get rid of like half the shelves here, and we, the elementary librarians and Deborah Small at the time said, no, you need hands-on print, hands-on text in the elementary school. So they do look differently. But that being said, the volumes I think are large. We're also, adapting to these new libraries. So part of the issue is there is slightly less shelving space in the new redesigned libraries than we had in the older libraries. It's more movable. So,
Look, some part of the canon remains for perpetuity, and some of it needs to be culled and replaced, and and kept contemporary. So, I'm just putting those words in. Obviously, you're the educators here, and I'm no Luddite, but I do like the idea of paper books still being very strong in our buildings.
Carol?
I just wanted to also mention our classrooms have classroom libraries as well, which we've invested a lot in this year. So kids have access, I agree with you, with the hands-on books in their classrooms as well.
Great point. Thank you. It's been a while since I was a kindergarten parent, but yes.
Are those classroom libraries reflected in these library book? Where would they be?
They're both in the elementary humanities and in the principal's budgets.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, anything else? Guidance and health services. Also under other instruction.
I think you missed technology.
Did I?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, it's on the right. Okay. Other instruction technology. Thank you, Marion. The technology budget supports 1 director of technology, 2 computer technicians, 4 computer aides, 1 secretary, and 3 outsourced computer technicians. And there's some more there, but questions, comments? Go ahead, Marion.
So we have always had computer aides at the elementary school, and traditionally where they worked was in the computer labs. And they assisted the students in the computer labs. Those computer labs no longer exist. So I think we should take a look at what role they're playing and how they are being utilized, if they are being effectively utilized, or should we consider eliminating some of those positions now with the different way that we do technology, or replacing, 3 aides with maybe a different type of technology person that could maybe service all 3 buildings.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. We are, looking at, non-replacements or cuts and on the instructional side, but also in the paraprofessional side. So that is one part of looking at that.
Sorry.
Hey, Rich, and then
My
Jean.
understanding, though, that because the nature of the situation has changed where we don't have the need for computer labs anymore, my understanding is the aides are basically working in all classrooms now. Is that not true?
Yeah, they're servicing a lot in terms of Chromebooks and working in, with smartboard technology, and they're much more mobile versus, 10 years ago when they'd be sitting in the computer lab and classes would come in and they do keyboarding. So their role has changed.
I was going to say that's exactly the case, because now they have the Chromebooks within the classrooms. They are moving from classroom to classroom and assisting in that way. Just recently, we had a situation where they needed an aide to maybe cover a hallway or a classroom, and they said, "Is it okay if I use the computer aide just for one period?" But for them, pretty much they are going from classroom to classroom and assisting in that way.
I'll just add, and this might be what Carol wants to get into, but the technology that's being used in the classroom, we're having conversations about this in our technology committee about have we gone too far in the lower grades, and but it is a reality. And so things like Google Classroom, Renaissance Star, the testing that we do for standardized testing for progress monitoring for all of our kids. So there are all these things, especially post-COVID, that we do that they do assist with, to Trustee Lotta's point.
Going to mention that they're helping us with this required transition to computer-based testing.
In terms of the SAT or in terms of?
No, this year our elementary students in 5th grade have to take their state assessments online, and next year that'll go to 4th grade, and the following year 3rd grade.
Okay.
Held out as long as we can. They're making us. So I'll just say that. We're not endorsing it, but we have to.
Well,
Question. So you made reference to this a few seconds ago, Dr. Zia. I'm wondering on page 33, first of all, the sort of mini narrative at the top does say that budget includes plans to replace aging Chromebooks on a rolling basis and start phase 2. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So the Chromebooks, I'm just wondering I know the technology committee is talking about this. So just wondering if this is an opportunity for an update on whether we still want to have or, need to have one-to-one student Chromebooks, even at K1, 2, maybe even 3.
I do think that's part of the thinking here. We haven't landed on a recommendation yet, and I know we moved some of our presentations around, so I'm not sure if we'll have time to do the technology presentation. We'll issue it as a report to the board instead, but that is part of the thinking, and I want to thank Mr. K for helping us to think a little bit more out of the box there. Right after COVID, we were in full mobilization mode of every single child having a Chromebook. But now that we've relaxed from that, we're thinking about how we can use it with more mobility, especially in grades K through 2. So that definitely factors into that.
So that right now, though, the line we're looking at is near the bottom of the page, 2630.400-90. I see Chromebook replacements for CBT, that's computer-based testing, and incoming kinder class. So that, I guess that's what really caught my eye, is that we are still providing, at the moment, one-to-one Chromebooks for incoming kindergartners.
That's right. But to be honest, we do have to think creatively about that because we do, have replacements that we need district-wide, for students district-wide. And I think that, plays a role there too. Specifically at the middle school, for middle school parents, there's insurance and things that cover that the parents pay part for. But if those numbers go up, we need to use some of those funds for that.
There's a $98,000 decrease in that section. Was that just all of it combined?
That is a reduction in the purchase of Chromebooks for the same purposes we were just discussing.
Thank you.
And that was I've said this a couple times, but I just want to point out, because Mr. K really helped and Dr. Smythe, that was part of that. How do we find non-instructional expenses that we can tighten up to, you see that amount to save a teacher from being cut.
Any more? We will move on. Other instruction, attendance, guidance, and health. This part of the budget supports attendance, guidance, and health departments. The attendance budget covers half of the salary of the district registrar and the expenditure for residency searches. Guidance counselors, school social workers, psychologists work closely with students to develop both academic, career, and social emotional skills. This also includes some partnerships. And it also includes the medical director services, new employee physicals, some clerical support, substitute nurses, 8 full-time nurses, and so forth. Questions, comments? I will say I'm always impressed that we invest so much in mental health here. I'm very proud of that. Especially given that in this area of Long Island, mental health services are incredibly expensive and very, very hard to find right now for children. And so the fact that we're able to keep those services in-house is another way that, another equity piece that our students whose parents might not be able to afford or willing to find outside services can utilize what we have to offer here. So I think that's great. Yes.
One thing I want to mention, this, Dr. McCary, that our school psychologists in particular are attending to students' mental health, but for those who haven't worked in a school, they do so much more than that. They're handling all the initial evaluations for special education in their building. They're organizing that. They're sitting in on child study teams as our social workers. Especially since COVID, the theme, we've seen more referrals to the child study team. It's where certain professionals come together to problem solve, almost like medical rounds before our kids. And it's a collaborative approach to find interventions before special education services. And so they're doing a tremendous amount in those areas as well.
Thank you.
Page 28, Jamie, you might know the answer to this. About 5 lines down, high school office clerical.
38, Dave?
Sorry, page 38. What did I say, 28?
Yeah.
Sorry, 38. I wonder everyone overly shifting through their book. 2815, 160, 50, 30, 161. Looks like that line had been dormant for a while, but now it's resuscitated.
And that is splitting the cost. There's a shared clerical between, I believe it's the transportation department and it was always charged just to the transportation department, and in doing this budget.
So there was that reduction in the transportation department. It was, I think it's still a net gain, but it's closer when you factor this in. All right, thank you. I just want a question I'm just looking at this line for nurses for the summer program. Where are we with the consideration of the TENS program as a revenue generator?
When I walked in this morning, it was on Dr. Smythe's computer. So we're talking about it, but we are remodeling it a little bit to try and generate more revenue. We do proceed with caution, but we are specifically, and we'll report this to you, but we're changing the fees slightly. But then we're also going to offer afternoon portion which is going to be looser. It'll be more childcare like the childcare we have here, but we'll have organized activities, but it won't be classes like in the morning, which we do think we've heard from parents for several years now since we started in 2020. Could you structure more like a real camp? So we're trying to get, for parents' sake too, and students' sake, to get them to 3:00. So we
Is
hope
that,
that-
I mean, I assume partnering with Oyster Bay and Tappan is a bridge too far at this point, those kinds of things, because of the pool.
We haven't thought of it as a formal partnership. We are adding like a field experience component to some of it, but that is something, I think we could look at in terms of permitting and, what we'd be allowed to do. It would just, the fee is kind of what we're working with to make it work. But that's a very interesting idea.
We'll take a sleepover camp too, some of us parents.
I will say
Yeah,
some parents
we could offer.
are definitely signing up for camps already. So, it would be great to get that information out soon. And I think I said this last year, some people are also very last minute. So if you, don't fill up a class, you might want to just send something out the week before, 2 weeks before and say, hey, anyone interested? If you don't have anything for your kid to do this week, we have XYZ open.
We sent out a save the date, and our plan is right after this upcoming break to send out all the registration information. And I just want to put a plug in. We are going to have a field trip experience opportunity, so kids could pick a day and take a field trip, and
It's great.
that'll be part of it this year.
Carol, that's great. Excellent. All right, keep going. It's very exciting when we talk about stuff here and then all of a sudden it happens. It's
Work that way.
it's very exciting. Anything else? Nothing else here? All right. Okay, let's go. Athletics.
Question here, sorry.
Go ahead.
On page 41, sports equipment. I know that the Booster Club helps us out a lot, but I just saw, it was never a large amount there. Just want to make sure that we're not anticipating any costs there.
On
Oh, sorry, it's
the
page 41.
the 291
Yes,
code,
that one.
yeah.
Thank you.
One thing, and I have to say, all of the directors have been just so collaborative in trying to find savings and be creative. So the way we approach this here is overall athletics, this budget is flat. There are a couple of decreases and increases. Overall, it's pretty flat. Mr. Lang was super helpful, but we were trying to purchase things this year, equipment this year, based on underspending that he's done. So, unexpected savings that Mr. Lang has had this year, we're trying to purchase items that are durable, that will last into next year, so that we wouldn't have to budget them for next year.
Go ahead, Jamie.
You
Oh,
go.
I'm
I think
sorry.
you were going to say the same.
Then I'll let you say it, Jamie.
We did recently purchase, if that was the high jump mat and there was a budget transfer to do that, and those were things that he originally talked of possibly putting in this budget, and we were able to get it.
I was going to say, at a recent Booster Club meeting, Director Lang did say that we're nearing the conclusion of the uniform replacements, and that the only ones at this point that haven't been replaced are ones that we don't really supply due to the inherently personal nature of them. So that's on the kids themselves. I did want to ask on page 41, the interscholastic coaching number is up. Is that just contractual increases, or those were stipends, or are there new positions? I know in the past we had addressed certain sports that were over enrolled and needed an extra assistant, and we were able to get some of those positions. And I know all positions are filled now. I'm just looking at on page 41, 150-91, the second section, second line.
That part of it is contractual increases that add up with the many coaches we have. Each individual coach's salary is slightly going up. It's not a big game, but when you add that up, the cumulative is high. But then also we have had discussions about the middle school badminton.
Okay, great.
And offering that. I think Mr. Pappas, just correct me if I'm wrong, because the board was extremely generous in our first summer in adding a few key positions that we felt like we needed that were understaffed. So there might have been a small correction there too.
Is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Jamie's typical fashion, looking at the actuals and adjusting to keep things as tight as possible. So I think that's a third factor there.
Offhand, do you know how many individuals this represents? How many coaches are we talking about? Must be quite a number.
That number offhand.
I
wish I did.
Not
I
even
was like,
going to
at this
venture a
moment-
guess in
Okay.
public,
But-
but it's.
But
Okay.
we will get that to
Curious.
you. Yeah, that's a great question. We should know that.
Any other comments before we, go ahead.
Quick comment that I understand we're in a period of contraction. I understand we're going through this with a fine tooth comb, but I think that I have not attended a booster meeting at a season change where I didn't hear about an issue with uniforms. So I just want to make sure that we are providing ample funding so that is just, we can move on from that conversation as a district.
We feel comfortable with this amount, and I think it is because we've had many conversations. I remember the Booster Club meetings I was attending with Dr. Dolan when I was still assistant, and so that was ingrained in my mind when I came into the fall. But we had a lot of good, productive conversations. Like basically, parents felt free to talk to me about it, and so we were able to troubleshoot. I think also one thing the board has spoken a lot about, and we've talked about in athletic advisory and boosters is coming up with a more electronic inventory and replacement schedule like Ms. Rodriguez does in the Fine and Performing Arts. We got a great internal model there that I think we're going to work towards doing that with this and equipment.
I do have one more comment. Sorry. I was just thinking about your comments in the beginning, Dr. McCary, about getting factual information and Dr. Z wrote an incredible email on March 11th with factual information. I'm just wondering for people who aren't on our mailing list, do you know, Dr. Z, was that email posted to our website? Is there another place to see it?
Was it posted on Instagram and social media?
And Ms. Newman did put it, we do have it on the website. It's on the pop-up. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, other questions, comments? Dave?
What about this section? But I know on the agenda, it says revenues are going to be discussed. Is that, we're doing that? That was at the very top. We kind of moved into the sections right away.
Yes.
I don't want to stop this conversation of line by line, but make sure we don't move on too quickly. Sorry.
No, I think, we had designed that if we had any updates on revenues. So I did want to mention one thing, if that's okay, if it's acceptable under here. And that is, we do not have an update from the state yet, but the one house budgets from the Assembly and the Senate were released. And there's nothing specific about North Shore in those one house budgets. Trustee Mosca and I talked about that from a LAC perspective, and I did speak with DHC about that. We don't have updates yet on grants that we're requesting for North Shore at this point. So those aren't in the one house budgets. But overall, in a bipartisan fashion, both houses are asking for restored state aid that the governor's proposal had taken away. So we're hopeful. There's discussion happening now. The reconciliation process now is going to happen with the budget, and we should hopefully know within 3 weeks' time about that. So keep our fingers crossed.
So maybe by our next meeting, but that's only 2 weeks away, isn't it?
That is the first week of April is that target date. So we're hopeful that week, or hopefully by the week after, the meeting after, we'll know.
Yeah, I had some thoughts about the revenues that I guess I wanted to share because I thought it was bullet pointed on there. So if this is the time, if everyone's
Let's
done
do
with-
revenue now.
Sorry, Mr.
because
Lemar. I thought you were looking to me to say something. I'm
No, I just want to make sure that we didn't move on to being done with our budget discussion without addressing the revenue question, because I think look, the micro that we go through is obviously incredibly important, but how we pay for all of this is also a huge factor in this. Those are the scales, what the demands are and how we pay for it. And so I thought a lot about that this week, to some degree in response to that kind of propaganda email and the lack of truth in it. But I thought about that in the context of we spend a lot of time on this board and as a community thinking about the folks behind that propaganda campaign. And it's not the same as the conversations we're having. The direction we're going to go in as a district of how much we pay in taxes and how much we get through other revenues and how we keep our budget as tight as possible for the service of the kids is the conversation that we're having. That conversation has to be based in facts and truth. And that's why it's really good to have people who are actually here today as opposed to, it does boggle my mind that someone would, as you said, Dr. McCary, see something just posted by an anonymous person on the internet and just be like, oh, I guess that's true. So, for example, the report, didn't say that better management would do this. It presented us with options that we can do, different management. And we as a board help set that direction. And so for me, when I think about what my role is up here and what our role up here should be, it's not about countering what's going on out there, whether it's true or not true. It's about trying to make a recommendation that I feel is appropriate for the students of today and the students of tomorrow and the community as a whole, so we can all survive. Because this community without these schools is a very different looking place. I think that's pretty clear. And so the question of how to sustain these schools when we've taken this big hit, no one's mentioned the word LIPA here tonight at all. We're just talking about the micro and not revenue, but we all know we're in the last year of a $38 million cumulative shortfall from this LIPA settlement that has been foisted upon us through no doing of our own, but was just put here. And so tonight, in terms of this revenue discussion that I thought we were having, and I guess I'm having right now, I'm thinking about how to serve as a steward of these schools the way we're supposed to be. And to me, I think Dr. Z and the team have found the sweet spot in terms of the cuts.
Can I just say something?
yeah.
I was going to call it, this is the Goldilocks budget.
Yeah, there are cuts here that we haven't seen before. Departments going, look, I don't think it's sustainable for every department to be lower year after year after year after year, but for 1 year, sure. I think that makes sense. To excise positions of this volume, I think it's something that has to be done. So I'm not necessarily saying that the cuts that you've presented, which I think are very strategic and will be noticed and seen without maybe being deleterious to student experience, are not something I'm arguing against or think we shouldn't do. The question for me is how we fund it. And right now that funding is through essentially a use of various fixed revenue forms and two variables. And those variables are the tax levy and the use of reserves that we're using. The question about reserves that are told untruthfully in this community by these propaganda folks is that we have a $30 million rainy day fund. What in fact we have is less than $20 million in specific funds that are used for certain things. Someone asked, I think it was Vice President Colasiopo, about what happens to these septic systems. Actually, a lot of questions about septic systems tonight. And obviously, if one of them fails, it wasn't a septic system that failed at Glen Head. It was an outdated, basically basin that slowly collapsed. But those expenses are used by a repair reserve. So it doesn't come out of the budget. So we don't have to condense teachers or get rid of music for a semester to pay for it. We have those monies in reserve. Things like workers' comp, things like teachers' retirement service, things like employee retirement service. All of these things that we have are vital to our district and can't just be used. Anyone who understands school budgeting knows it's not a rainy day fund that's just a slush fund you just pull from where you want it. There's 4% of your operating budget that is unrestricted, that we're at, that most districts are at, and none of them go under that number, because that's something that would really happen if you had some kind of huge catastrophe that wasn't covered by these other reserves. So in this budget, we're using $1.25 million in reserves from the employee retirement service and the teachers retirement system service. And I think the lever of that versus the tax levy, I think it's at least worth having the conversation of looking at a tax levy that was slightly higher than you proposed. Right now, you're proposing a budget increase of 1.9, I think it's 1.906%. That is I believe you told us at some meeting, the second lowest in Nassau County. Is that something I had heard?
Based on the data we have right now, we know numbers are shifting, but of the districts, we got a ranking number second to a Valley Stream district.
Last year, I think we were the lowest increase last year in taxes, or darn close. So our increase in the budget is as tight or tighter than every other district. The reason that our tax rates are going up is because we're not getting the tax money from the utilities anymore. That's just where we are. And so while I recognize, as that parent pointed out the other day, that every dollar matters, your numbers of what you proposed were that essentially, again, you can correct me, but essentially for about $450,000, it's about $60 a year, roughly, to a homeowner. Could be more. Obviously, some people in this community have $5-6 million homes, so for them it's going to be a lot more. But for a home between $750,000 to $1 million, which are sort of the sweet spot again of homes in our district, it would be for about a $500,000 increase, about an $8 to $10 increase per month in what we pay in taxes. I'm not poo-pooing that. Every dollar counts. But when people use the phrase spend the taxpayer money the way you would spend your own money, I think that's a very valid question. And I think the answer to some degree is, in my home, I don't raid my IRA to pay for more now. I pay for it now as we go. And so I think that small amount makes sense to consider by this board and by the administration as we continue having these things, and as we continue talking with the community, to think about what that would mean. Because that tax levy that we set right now sets us up going forward for future tax levies. The sheet that Jamie gave to us, Mr. Pappas gave to us, showed the projection of 5 years in the future of where this leads us, and that 1 year's tax levy and the way the cap is constructed leads to limitations and or possibilities for the future. And we don't know what we know the next 2 years of what's coming in terms of LIPA contribution, but we don't know what's happening for the utilities thereafter. And the fact that you've been talking about potentially in the 27-28 year, a shift that will make these annual shifts look small is something that this community has to reckon with now. You don't put your head in the sand. Not you. I'm not saying you're doing that at all. But we as a community don't put our heads in the sand and say, that's 2 years away. I don't have to think about that now. I think we have to think about that right now. And so I am not suggesting that we go to the full cap of 5.632%. But in a budget that is less than 2% increased, I think potentially considering a little more taxes and a little less use of reserves is something that we should consider.
Thank you. Maria?
May I just add on to that, because I wanted to make similar comments, but I wouldn't even try to compete with Trustee Ludmar's incredibly eloquent description. I just want to point out the specifics of that, since we have a 5-year projection. We can see this very clearly. I know it is the revenue section of my book. We go out to projected budgets all the way to 2028, 29, but those last two columns, 2027, 28, 2028, 29, on the line for LIPA direct assessments, that is the roughly 8.4 million that we're talking about losing if when the agreement is, if the agreement is not renewed, right? And right now, because it is the best information we have, we must assume that that money will be there, but we also know that there is a fairly significant possibility that it will not. So as scary as the numbers look at the bottom of those columns, it is potentially much worse, which I think I just wanted to emphasize that in context of what you're saying.
That is a huge
planning now for what that is going to mean is really critical.
And I think ultimately, Dr. Zublionis and the administration, in your going around talking with this community, having that conversation, that's what you ultimately will recommend to the board as what you think is passable in this community. That's what the community wants. And I am going to defer to your wisdom on that, because that's your role, and you have spoken with many, many more people. I mean, this is your job all day long. I'm off making uniform components all day long. But what you I think it's important to say that there are people here in this community who are interested in participating in this process. The people who are sending out that propaganda are voting no if you close Seacliff School tomorrow. They're voting no on this budget. The conversation we have to have is what the right direction is long-term for the district. And I at least want to put out there that we can't be so scared of suggesting something that may even be a tax increase that will be above 4%. Because they're going to be so angry. What are they going to do? They're going to send more emails? They're going to do more of these things? I don't think that should be the driving force. I'm not saying it is, but I want to be, now that I'm not the board president and I could just speak for myself as an individual trustee, I want to be throaty about making that case, as I just have been. So thank you.
I agree that it is worth continuing the conversation and offering these options. I had a little bit of I was interested in the revenue from a little bit of a different concern, which I share your concerns, Trustee Ledmar, but I also recognize that the revenue used, 1.25 of which is part of our settlement money, and that is gone. So, in terms of longevity and our ability to fund our schools, that is a shortfall that we are looking at for the following budget built in. And ostensibly, I would like to believe that we are going to pay back these reserves and to maintain our strong fiscal scores and our fiscal health. So then the number increases. So now we're at 1.25 in reserves that we have to ostensibly repay. I mean, we could just define our own payment schedule there, and then that 1.25 million of a settlement. So now and the Levine grant and the other grants that are not promised. So now we're in a hole walking into a budget that we don't have any understanding of what, that we will have to make up for. So, we have the opportunity to kind of close that chasm, or at least offer the option to the taxpayers and have this conversation actively during this process and explain the nuances here. So I agree that it is worth a conversation to see what that looks like and feels like for the community.
Just say one thing quick. That's such a good point. And I was thinking when everybody was talking, we're using basically $4 million in reserves, which is a large amount because of what you just said. We'll then start budgeting for the 25-26 budget down $4 million because that's a one-time payment from ourselves. We would have to go back to the reserves, but each time we do that, we're lowering it, and we might not even have that amount to go into. The LIPA reserves will be used, same with grants as well. So it's then at the same time we have this cliff on the horizon. So that's a scary proposition.
Thank you to Dr. Z, Jamie, Carol, the principals, the directors, our community members who have been writing and who've been attending the community budget meetings, which are still ongoing. So thank you to everyone. I'd now like to open up the floor for public comments. Name and town of residence.
Everyone, you hear me? Thank you. Lisa Visa, Glen Head. Just one budget specific thing. Could you speak to the $50,000 decrease in special ed staff development?
Sure, absolutely. So Carol and I with Chris did a review of how we cover most professional development for all teachers. And it turns out we really handle most of that through Carol's regular professional development code. So we left a little bit in the special ed code, but we don't believe that will have an impact on what teachers are actually doing and what we want to do with them.
That was out there. 50K was significant. So thank you for explaining that. Just two comments.
I just want to add one thing. The grant that Carol applied for will service special education students, excellent, which is also hopefully $50,000.
Excellent. Yeah, because I know Chris Marino does an amazing job of gathering and taking advantage of every grant situation possible for our kids. So he's done a great job there. So just two other comments, another question, but therapy dog program, that is amazing. I think that is an incredible, you have it for the middle school now. I'm hoping it goes to the high school. All three of my kids had them at their colleges. I mean, they were so, so important during exam time. My oldest daughter went to Dartmouth where it's like, dogs go to class. I mean, basically, that's the kind of town it is. But, they really do soothe the students. I mean, there's evidence for that. And I'm so glad we were able to fit that in. It's low cost, high effectiveness. So whoever was behind that,
Dr. Katay.
excellent. A1.
With lots of support.
I will support it forever. I love it. The Excel program, I read a little bit in the narrative. Could you elaborate on that a bit? I think it was in the middle school guidance narrative.
Yeah, it's a high school program, actually, and it's based on a program that Mr. Doherty used to run at Herrick's, actually, and we started this where it's extra support using staffing that we already have with existing social studies, English, math, and science teachers, one each, and it's extra support for students who aren't classified with the special education program, and it's giving them extra support for students who might be at risk but who aren't classified with a disability.
So they're referred to whomever through an SST or an IST, or each team. I mean, the teams of teachers, they all speak to each other. I know that. So is that how they're identified, and they kind of go up the chain?
Yeah, I think there's
pre-referral.
It's a pre-referral service. There's a generated list at the end of the school year for the following school year. That's like the starting list of students that are recommended, and then on a rolling basis, that could happen at the child study team also.
And just one comment about increasing and going all the way to the cap. I think that's a very risky idea. I can understand many perspectives of that. I absolutely can. I think it's a risky idea in this economic time, and the information that's kind of already been delivered to folks who've been to your meetings. It might risk a failure of the budget. I mean, last year's budget wasn't a mandate by any stroke of the imagination. So I just worry that that's, a huge risk. And believe me, I understand the benefit of going to the cap or staying in the middle versus going all the way to zero. So, but thank you, everyone. I appreciate all the work you've done.
Thank you. Anybody else? The Goldilocks budget. I'm hoping it goes viral.
Michael Conklin, Greenvale. I just wanted to thank you for all the work that's gone into this. I know I've attended a bunch of these things, and as I gather news and I look at other school districts and the deficits they face, I see Amityville with $3.6 million, and their answer to that is 47 layoffs. Riverhead, their answer to it is a 4.93% increase and 37.8 teaching positions eliminated. Us at 1.9% increase overall budget. On some of our neighbors, I can't gather the information that you have but I know Port Washington is at 6.8. Call Place is at 5.72. I think you've done a nice job. I don't think you're ever going to make everybody happy, but some of us appreciate the work that's gone into it. And I think if we get through this, those other things, layoffs may be in the line in 27, 28. But let's get through here and work on it afterward. I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Conklin. Appreciate that.
I should add that the district is the larger employer in this community, and many of the people we employ live in our community. So the more we can prevent layoffs, the more we can keep our families well and safe, and our students in a good position. other public comments? All right, last chance. I will now close public comments and we can all move to action 10, personnel. We're going to do A through K. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Second. I know we have a retirement, which is going to surprise people maybe.
Yeah, I did want to mention Miss Jody Larson. Trying to get emotional. Jody has been with the district for over 20 years and is a resident. She fits the description you just laid out, Dr. McCary. Her girls went through the school. Both did very well. Professional squash players went to Harvard. So I can't give North Shore the credit for that. They're amazing kids and they have an amazing mom. And Jody, who I knew well at Seacliff, is just such a great teacher. I learned so much about teaching and learning from watching Jody. And what I learned the most about was how music instruction, instrumental music instruction, can inform good classroom instruction in the academic areas. She just contributes in so many different ways, including most recently being the structural force behind the trip to Slovenia on the music tour. She was the organizer. Anybody who knows Jody knows that she's tremendously organized, but and has high standards, but that her students really just adore her and work hard and grow for her. So she's been a gift to us for many years. She'll be dearly missed.
She's amazing. She has high standards, but she also is able to read a child and know when you can push and when you cannot push. She's fantastic. Any other questions or comments?
Do have another retirement. You have non-certified Bob from the Glen Head School. Having been a PTO mom in the Glen Head School, we know Bob well, and there was nothing we asked of him or anyone asked of him that he didn't do, and he did on his own. He really is a force to be reckoned with, and does it quietly and with a smile on his face.
Always a smile.
Never complains. So he's going to be greatly missed by the faculty, the parents, the building leaders. We appreciate his years of service to Glen Head, and congratulations on a well-earned retirement, Bob.
This is actually a different, because this is Bob from Seacliff. And I'm sorry, but I had a story about this. I'm sorry.
It was very nice, because I thought Bob from Glen Head was also retiring.
That might be coming. I'm sorry I didn't say anything, but there's actually a funny story behind this where Bob.
I don't know Bob from Seacliff, but you do.
So I don't. Yeah. Well, he came in a couple of weeks ago with a
We're heading up,
note
we have a serious Bob deficit
saying,
heading out.
Wait, this must be the Bob from Seacliff.
But
I know.
I will tell you, the other Bob's name did come up, Bob Kemp, because and with Jody, folks who have been here, who have served us well, and who are the people we look to, are now in that phase where they are starting to retire or think about retirement. So this is Bob, who's a Seacliff custodian. He came 2 weeks ago with a handwritten note saying it's time for him to retire. Just to give you a little insight into Bob, who's totally adored by the Seacliff faculty, every Friday morning he makes 2 pots of coffee, different coffee, for the Seacliff faculty. He writes an email that we all get at 6 a.m. saying which coffee is in the faculty room. That's the kind of care he has. And he's just such a warm, as is Bob Kemp as well. These are all amazing people, but just such a warm, caring, cares so much. This past summer, spent 3 solid weeks cutting all of the weeds around the central office parking lot, making it look beautiful. It still looks amazing, and is just a great person. So,
and I do want to point out, we are gushing about Jody. We're gushing about Bob from Glen Head, who's not retiring, and Bob from Seacliff, who is retiring.
Well, yeah.
And it speaks to how precise and how careful we need to be with this budget, because these are real human beings who are working here, who we cherish and value and want to protect.
Can I just say, I think it also speaks to the idea that this kind of organization is made great by individuals who, on their own, bring greatness to what they do in every way. And it's so great that even if Mary had the wrong guy, what a great testament to someone that I do know who she was talking about and who is awesome.
I should have noticed last name was Kemp. Once you said it, I knew.
But there's so many people like that in our organization. People who go above and beyond. People who care, in part because it's their job and they feel a responsibility, but because of who they are. And there are so many people. This organization is replete with givers and people who do for our kids. And so, how great we got to honor 3 tonight.
May I make a very small tribute to Bob from Seacliff, who I did not make the connection to the name, but he was also, in terms of the little things that make the district what it is, he was always above and beyond helpful with the garden in the years that I was there in charge of it. He was, really helpful. So I will miss him as well.
I'd love to just amplify the Jody Larson goodbye. Our family has been a direct beneficiary of her. It's a commitment that you can't pay for. You can't give enough money. I remember it was before my son was in her band, but there are stories during the pandemic because she's part of the Seacliff community as well. And there's stories of, her from her window, having kids out front of her home, practicing their instruments and getting instrument lessons. I mean, that's a kind of commitment that comes so deep from the heart that it's a big loss for the North Shore community, and we wish her much luck on her well-earned retirement as well.
All in favor? All right, thank you. We're going to take action 11, approval of resolution for the annual school district budget vote and election, with action 12, resolution to change the date of a board meeting. First, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you. I heard a second. I just want to thank everyone for their flexibility with changing the date. I think we're moving it from the 18th, right? Yeah, the 18th to the 16th, which the meeting will be held the same day as the BOCES vote. And I don't know why we always have been doing it separately, but going forward, we don't have to do it separately anymore. Actually, we can have one meeting. So thank you, everybody, for their flexibility. Should we do all in favor? All right, thank you. Action 13, 14A and C, 15, 16A and B. Okay, this is approval of the pit musician, acceptance of donations from the high school, from CASA, from Glen Head PTO. It's the approval to dispose inventory and the approval of the contract for the costumes and the approval of the contract with All Care. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
I heard a second. Questions, comments?
Just a quick clarification,
Yes.
the acceptance of a grant from the Viking Foundation to the high school.
Sorry.
Want to make sure we thank the Viking Foundation and CASA and the Glen Head PTO.
I just want to explain the pit musician change. The reason we need to change the pit musician is because the original has a gig on Broadway. So I think
Wow.
we're
Way
close,
cool.
but they couldn't pass that up.
Do you know what it was?
I'm not sure, but I'll find out.
No.
It didn't say.
Okay.
I mean, our productions are pretty darn good. Seems like a lateral move to me. Yeah, I would just say I will support all the contracts on this, but I think that, as I literally just said, our plays are superlative. And as someone, as I said, I'm in the uniform industry, not in the costuming industry. Before anyone starts propagandizing that somehow I'm providing uniforms for the or costumes, which I'm not. No, we're into mass production. Not every kid on their own. But we had a woman who worked for me who was our head seamstress, who was the head of the PTA in Plainview, and she did 200 costumes for those kids every year on her own, volunteering. It was unbelievable. They did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and she made a dress that blew up when that character turns into the blueberry. I couldn't believe there was a string in the back, and it was unbelievable. It was a one-time use, and it was amazing. When we did, well, anyhow, I won't go off on that, but I just did. She's terrific. The only thing I'm going to say is we have had conversations about what this costuming would cost and the progression, where only a few years ago it was 4,000, 5,000, went up to 7, went back to 6. Now we're at 10. And
We did follow up on this.
okay, and I would
Yeah.
just say, and we're also, we're certainly not going to. I'm not in a position to say no now and not do that. But I would love to have a more in advance approval system where we knew what we were getting into in advance, so we'd have a little more leverage in the future. Although I support it, and the plays are awesome and unbelievable experience. As we were pulling in here, I saw kids who were just leaving play practice, and I could just see them, walking together, and they're so excited. They're getting ready for all this. It's an amazing experience being in a high school play and dressing up and doing all the things that they do. Couldn't support it more. But that's just one thing I wanted to mention.
We did have a resident who had a costume store, and she did a lot of the work for many, many years for us. And we were spoiled, and she had a whole crew of people who helped. Just ask Natalie Woods about ironing the dresses for The Sound of Music. She had a lot to say about that. But we were very spoiled for a lot of years because we got it very cost effectively. We did have a student who graduated around 2017 who also was a very talented costumer who helped us out. But it's very difficult to get people to the costuming at this level. So I know that's been a problem. I say to you once again, you have LIU around the corner that has a theater production department, and they do have students who do costuming. We used to do our light and sound from a student who was there, who was a former student here. And if you're looking for alternatives, that may be, kids have to do internships or have pocket money. Costuming is Michael had to do costuming, even though that's not what he did. Kids who go through the theater program have to do that.
Chris, you did follow up on the cost. I don't know if you just want to talk a little bit about it. Some of it has to do with just the prom scene.
Yeah, the production itself is very costume intensive. So that is a driver of this. I do think there might be a stipend piece in here that I want to look at that might be raising that. That is part of our contractual rate. But yeah, we can definitely look at all of those things going forward in advance, looking for other options, certainly. We had a great discussion at the one of the talks with our business owners about internships and things like that too. So the general spirit of that, I think when we have our Viking community meetings, the terms mentoring and interning are the two terms that come up more than anything. So and that's authentic learning. So it's good all around.
If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, there were some cuts from the original, what they originally wanted in the
Yes, you're right.
proposal.
That's right. Yeah. I did. Dahlia did do some negotiating on this because she was concerned. So she actually, and I can put this in a future update. She did kind of break down how she moved the vendor down a little bit. So can always do more, and we'll do that in advance too.
I appreciate it. I know I do have some sense of what these things cost, and I did buy my tickets today. So here we go.
When I logged in to buy them, as it was the seats were just disappearing. I couldn't pick my seats fast enough. So it's gonna be very popular. All right. Go ahead.
Can we talk about some of these amazing gifts a little bit and highlight, because that's part of.
Sure. You're on.
Yeah, I had the benefit of hearing Casa talk about this at one of the PTO meetings about what they're offering, but maybe Dr. Z, you could talk about the two gifts.
Yeah. So
There's three gifts.
sure. I'll start with Casa because we always say they're amazing. They're just so easy to work with. They're collaborative. They have great ideas. And so this is a donation from CASA on this agenda for the Wellness Center. We have a newly constructed Wellness Center, which, would be, traditionally called the guidance office. But it really is a wellness center with a common space, and they gave a lot of resources to the 3 counselors to make it more homey, to cover the windows, to bring a little privacy in, just to fill some of those needs. And, they just, we're in an office there that day where we met about that. We walked through the whole middle school, just great collaborative partners. So thank you, CASA. Sorry.
I remember Allison talking about there's some specific iPads that are populated exclusively with mindfulness tools, and that there are a bunch of different opportunities for kids to really use the space to actively decompress, and they're evidence-based techniques that are being deployed that we wouldn't have had access to previously. So I thought that was kind of cool too.
And I have to say, Dr. Silva, Ms. Camardella, and Kevin actually had visited other schools, and they brought those ideas back to us, and we talked about them, me, Ms. Doherty, and the CASA board. So it was really amazing. The Viking Foundation grant actually is helping us to purchase something that we've cut out of our budget in the past. They're kind of like the big STEM machines for the high school in those new spaces. So they're helping us make a dent in that. We still have more to go. And of course, we're looking at all of our programs. But these are needed right now. And it's something that Mr. Ficini has been, some of these things they've been asking for, Mr. Slack and Mr. Gober. So very helpful for them. And then the Glen Head PTO for literacy materials for students in grades K through 2. I don't have a lot of detail on exactly what those materials are. Do you, Dr. Smith?
I do. With the science of reading, kids are using more decodable text, which weren't part of our traditional classroom libraries. So our literacy coaches and Julie Ritter have worked with the principals, the PTOs, to see if they can support some of that work.
All in favor? Okay, excellent. Action 17, approval of special education consultant agreement, and action 18, approval of special education tuition agreement. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
Second? This is the hour where everyone stops talking because we're starting to feel a little sleepy. Any questions or comments? All in favor? All right, we're going to move to unfinished business.
Finished business. We talked about at the last meeting, the board reports.
Yeah.
So I don't know where you want to talk about that at some point. We used to write something up, I think, and maybe the way to do it would be to write it up and distribute it ahead of time so that people could just ask questions.
I think it's nice for the public to hear about what's going on too. I mean, it's hard for me at this hour to think. I'm just wondering if maybe we can just keep them short.
I like hearing what everybody has to say, but I think short or maybe like the highlights would be the way to do it.
I agree.
We also try and, I don't know what agenda would be shorter, but some agenda that's shorter. Not when you're having student recognition or a detailed presentation. Maybe on one of our shorter agendas, we could put them in more strategically.
Okay. Other unfinished business. Okay. New business. Go ahead.
I would like to respectfully request that for our next April meeting, everyone make an effort to avoid the plastic water bottles and instead consider bringing reusable water bottles to amplify a project that Ms. DeFeo referred to, which is we'll be talking hopefully more about the plastic-free lunch day, which we can talk about more, but I'd be so grateful if everyone could consider. Thank you.
Any other new business? Okay, I think we're, first of all, nice job, everyone. Nice job. Thank you. I will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Everyone go home.
Thank you.
It's been a long week.
It's only 10:40. I saw the